Welcome to Feminist Founders, the community for entrepreneurs who are ready to reject toxic capitalism and do business differently and better. We're your hosts, Becky Mollenkamp and Faith Clark, and we're so excited you're here. If you'd like to support our work, please consider a paid membership. Information is in the show notes. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Well, hello, Faith. We're going to have a little conversation about something that happened recently and then talk about discomfort because there's a lot of discomfort woven into that story. And I think it should be interesting. How are you this morning?
I think it's good. Speaking of discomfort, because there's a bunch of navigating the daily life that we live. I think if we don't have a good relationship with our discomfort, everything is going to be tossed all over the place. Just based on weather and people being sick and then politics that, so today is one of those days when I'm managing my discomfort.
Very interestingly, so am I, because of a social media post I won't get into here, but it's been interesting recognizing all the ways that discomfort shows up. But the thing we're going to talk about specifically is something that happened, I guess, last month, but it wasn't that long ago, where we have a little group of mastermind of like four of us. I think that's where we were talking about it. And you had mentioned that you were having your car was in an accident with a deer, and unfortunately neither survived, neither the deer nor the car. And that you are now in a position of needing to find a new vehicle very quickly. And as I think many of us can relate, when unexpected financial hardships arise where you're like, where is this money supposed to magically appear from? I don't have that just sitting around. And so we were talking about that, and I sort of went into the mode, thanks entirely to the relationship that with you and Taina and Jordan, the folks in this community that I've been so blessed to be a part of, and the reconditioning of my own brain into a more communal, community, collective way of thinking. I'm so happy and proud of myself, and just that my brain immediately went to, then how do we solve this problem? Which is definitely not how I would have shown up years ago. I would have been like, oh, that sucks for Faith. Hope she figures it out. Instead, my brain this time just really quickly went into, okay, so how do we solve it? And I started thinking, who do I know? I know some people I bet that could help put some money towards this problem. And so I believe I asked your consent to seek out some financial support from other people, and you gave that. And so I started by posting in some communities I'm in.
So before we go into your process, though, I just want to reflect just even the lead up before you got involved, since we're talking discomfort, how many factors come together to what I call pitch us over, and in our lives, we're constantly, so many of us live on the margins of our capacity. And we are told, as much as you and I are in this work of liberation and all this type of thing, we are told that we need to be self-sufficient and fix it ourselves. I mean, that's the purpose of the car insurance. So that if, they call this particular thing, the deer hitting your car is the same as lightning striking your car. It's a no fault act of God type of situation. It should be straightforward. And yet I found myself with so many points of fear because, number one, my kids were driving, black-bodied humans meeting up with white cops. I had a whole thing. So I think I just want to frame the fact that I stepped into the moment that you are meeting me. I'm already activated, flamed, hyper protective, and not sure how to navigate. By the time it was, I'd had 15 or so different conversations with the insurance company because of a holdup that basically we could deconstruct in another recording. That was just empire, right?
I was going to say that because the insurance company was doing what corporations do, right? And doing their best to try and not pay you.
And doing what governments do and doing what there's so much of what we experience, which is large systems working for their own end, an end that we don't even know what that end is sometimes when we are the individuals on the inside of the experience. We're just like, yeah, but I'm the one without the car though, or whatever, right? So, we talk about the fact that the more marginalized identities you hold, the more tapped out you are, the more under-resourced you are, the harder you have to work just to, right, be on level. I'm there moving my hands as if people are going to be all seeing this. And so by the time I had multiple moments where I was on the phone with insurance company or tow company almost to tears, where I am willing to use rent money to pay something just to get the problem to go away. And so when I shared with you all, I think I was ready to wrap it up. I had taken a break from it for like 2 weeks, and the problems kind of dragged out. And just the way corporations, empire organizations are, while they had let the problem drag out and therefore increased a variety of costs associated with the problem, they were now ready to, oh, the 30 days according to your policy are up. And so you're going to lose the rental in 4 days. You need a car. No, well, you don't need a car, but you're going to lose this rental. So we haven't handed you money and you're going to lose the rental. And then, so I presented that to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was only trying to rush through the story thinking I would just explain what happened really is in me talking too quickly so that we could then move into both sides of the discomfort. But I appreciate the framing of what was leading up to that. Oh, just to quickly sort of what happened then was I reached out to a few communities that I'm in, and a few people gave some money towards this. Not me, they gave it to me to put to you, because I thought it felt easier for it to come through me, and then handing over one amount to you, so you didn't have to deal with all of the like administrative parts of all of this. And then I started to get the bug of like, well, got a little money. I mean, we could even could we get more? Could we solve this gap that you were sort of feeling of, I think it was sort of a $3,000 gap is what you were feeling to be able to get a safe and reliable car. And so then I put it out, I sent out a couple of emails to my list. I put it on in a couple of other places, but mostly it was in these smaller communities I'm in with people that really kind of know me, and then in my email list. And over a week, a little less than a week, so I'll just skip all the other like what happened exactly, but like over the course of a week, about 50 people gave varying amounts, everything from 9 to what was the biggest one? 200 or 300? I can't, no,
500.
500. One person gave. That still blows my mind. So from $9 to $500, 50 people, we were able to turn over to you $2,000. So we didn't hit the 3,000. I was kind of hoping, but we got to do
$2,500.
Oh, thank you. 2,500. That's right, because we were at 2,000 and then that 500. So nearly got there, right? Nearly got to $3,000 in the space of a week through the power of 50 people saying, here's some money. Uh, we were going to talk a little bit about like, cause I realized I experienced all kinds of discomfort. And also it was interesting to understand what the light it shined on my own discomfort of asking for myself. So I had very little discomfort in asking other people because it wasn't asking for me. So it felt easier to a big degree. Some of my discomfort was in my feelings of, one, I did feel a little of like, am I going to annoy people? Are they going to like exit off my email list, which by the way, a good number did, not a huge number, but it did. I saw a decline during that time, which is fine because those aren't my people. But I had those fears coming up of like, oh, are they going to not be on my list anymore? Are they not going to like me? You know, that kind of thing. But also I felt this discomfort of, I know some of you people who are seeing this and aren't giving money, and I know you could give money. It wasn't so much because honestly, the people gave money. I didn't have a whole lot of like, I know you could give more. It was more the people who didn't give and this feeling of, I know you could, and why aren't you? And is that a reflection on me? Is that because you don't believe me? I also had a lot of discomfort in people, like, are people going to think I'm scamming them and I'm going to pocket this money or whatever? And then people I didn't even know who gave money. And then that raised up some discomfort for me too of like, who are these people who don't even know me giving money? Like, how can they, I don't know, just like it felt really weird. It was one thing to receive from people I know because there's a relationship there and that felt okay. But the ones that I didn't know, for some reason, that felt really weird to me and a little uncomfortable in that, I don't know, like maybe I owe them or I'm not even sure what the discomfort is in that, but that was interesting. So I had a little discomfort along the way and we've talked about that, but we haven't talked so much about your side of the experience of this because you were like, let's do a podcast about it. So I'm really excited to hear from you about what the whole experience was like for you, where it felt comfortable, where it felt uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, and part of the reason why I queued it up the way I did is because I want to acknowledge that whatever discomfort we feel in the present moment is also in company of context, right? And so there's a way that perhaps had I not felt as worn down by the system, I would have been in different management of like the physiology, what this felt like to be in a vulnerable situation, to need to ask for help. So one of the first things I remember you asked, hey, do you know anybody who could do a GoFundMe? And I felt discomfort at that for a variety of reasons. Well, first of all, could I do a GoFundMe? For sure, I was not going to be asking for help for myself. And I know that that's tied to what does it look like? I don't want to reinforce stereotypes. I love social psychologist. We'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes. Claude Steele, stereotype threat. The acknowledgement that if there are stereotypes around an identity that's important to you, you spend energy just tracking that stereotype and not wanting to live into it. And so the image of a Black woman not being able to make it was in my head. And as much as I speak about what Empire does and why that's relevant and why that's not my fault, still there was like, it's like I was holding the burden of the stereotype. And I wasn't doing it consciously, but I know that was like the knee-jerk reaction. And when you said, okay, so you would do it, I was like, okay, I felt the relief of that. Somebody else asking, somebody else with a more powerful identity asking on my behalf. And then I felt the stereotype it's a different discomfort. It's the one that says, but I don't want Becky to be perceived as performing, as performative, as wanting to solve a thing. I like, there's a way that I experience you and experience it and experience what was happening in our call as personal and communal support. And I didn't want people to look at what was happening for you and make that be about, yeah, white people stereotypes, right? And so that was a part of what was happening for me. Another part of my discomfort is that every time I read, I'm on your email list. So every time I read you reaching out and saying, hey, this is what we got and this is what's going on and this is what mutual aid means. Like, again, it was about being on the receiving end of this attention. Yeah, I felt kind of weird. It brought up my old stuff about like, what does this look like? And shouldn't I, as a business person, as a consultant, shouldn't I look like a person that is, I just kept talking. Shouldn't I look like a person that is more
Good.
successful? So there was that every time I got the email. And I remember one of the emails, as you talked about me, I was just like, I'm not going to say here how I said tone it down, but in essence, in my mind, I was like, you're saying too many things about me. Can you just say less about this and less about that? Because there's a way that I felt exposed.
I can
And
imagine.
and so that was part of the thing. And then when as money came in, I felt so grateful. Just acknowledging that my discomfort, I was grateful that I had the relationship with my discomfort that allowed me to keep moving forward and not take action just on it. Because there's a part of me that could have just stopped, said, okay, one email is enough, or whatever. But I allowed myself to be on the receiving end. And that was interesting because it challenged, because you were doing that, I sent out email to two or three other people. And two people were very positive. They were just like, yeah, sure, send us the link. And one person kind of came back and said, no, they couldn't help. And I think, similar to your own commentary, given that I knew people had given $9, and these are people who didn't know me, and this person knew me, I felt like, do you understand my life with kids with a disability, what it means to be without a car? There's a way that not giving money that you would spend on coffee added to my sense of being invisible.
Mm.
There is the visibility and seen and being witnessed that was there, but it also sharpened the contrast for the people who didn't give. And I'm sure that they are not making it about, coffee or not coffee. But like for me, it's like, do we understand people's day-to-day lives? Like, I don't live in a place where it's possible to live without a car and it is winter. And so, yeah, so there was discomfort and judgment around some of that showed up as well. And, it's not, none of these discomforts were facts, but they could have led to behavior and could have gotten me into arguments or had me retreating
Right,
or,
or had us shut it down and not
yeah,
then you not be able to receive.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting 'cause so my discomforts were around perceptions of me largely, and yours were also around perceptions of you, which is I think just speaks to how we are as humans. We're so wired that way about, and I think it's biological in a way of like we how we are perceived by the community, whether that community is actually our community or not, mattered at one time. It meant life or death, right? Because if your tribe, if your community were to say, we don't want you anymore, you couldn't survive as a solo human back at a certain time in humanity, right? Like it just wasn't possible. That stuff still lives in.
And it's still not possible. No, we just pretend.
Well, right, right, right. It might be full, I guess, to a degree, right? Well, you're right. It's not because you can't make, no one's making their own food and all of that. Yeah, you're right. We pretend. But anyway, so I think that stuff still lives inside of us. And that fear is totally real in that it is a real fear that can have really harmful consequences. And yet we bring that fear and put it onto all kinds of places where it's not actually true. It doesn't matter if a stranger on the internet rejects me. That doesn't affect whether I am able to live. And the people who know me and love me, even if I were overstepping, making a mistake, doing something wrong, they're gonna like gently, lovingly call me back in, even if I were doing something, right? But most of them are just gonna say, "We love and accept you and we wanna help." But it's hard because we worry about how we're perceived. So I was worried also, as you're talking about this, thinking, "Okay, this is bringing some of it back," and remembering, I worry, am I going to be perceived as somebody who's, like, falling into this white savior trap? Am I gonna be seen as somebody who's trying to by the community, by my community, by myself? Am I internally falling into some of that belief system of, I'm here to save the day or, whatever. And I had to kind of like, I would have to keep checking myself too and remembering, like, there was a point where you said something about like, how many donations have we gotten or something? And I was like, they're contributions, not donations, because you're not a charity. This is not a charity. You're not a charity case, right? And having to remind myself of that, remind others of that. And then also reminding myself of like, because there's times where I want to be like, I'm doing this thing or I'm raising this money. And I have to try and keep checking myself to be like, we are collectively doing a thing for a part of we, right? And it's because, again, as I said, this is not how my brain was wired. 2 years ago, I would have been like, God, that sucks for Faith, right? Hope she can figure it out. So I was proud that my brain went to the place of collective thinking. But I can tell you, even through it, there were still those moments where that old part of my wiring shows up going like, look at Becky. Look what she's doing. Isn't she? She's so great here. She's helping. She's, leading. She's whatever. And having to like check that part of my brain as it showed up and remind it like, wait a minute. That's the old way of showing up. That is not the truth here. The truth is we collectively are doing something to help a part of our community, right? And that's all this is. And it's me all I'm doing truly is acting as a facilitator for redirecting money as a collective decision that we're making to say we want to collectively route some of our money to this problem, not even necessarily to Faith as a person, although there's that, but it's to this problem that's existing inside of our community and we want to support that. But I had to watch myself because that stuff kept coming up too. And then a lot of that perception of others and myself on myself. So it's interesting to watch all just these layers of discomfort that come up through something seemingly
Yeah.
simple.
And I think like I added in the layer of my own perception and the perception of us as partners in our venture. Because on the one hand, we're giving all the powerful things that we're giving, but true restorative practice is about symbiotic relationships, is about reciprocity, is about, it's not transactional. And to teach it also means to allow yourself to live it. And so part of, even if people were, I felt protective of you, as I said, and protective of the perception of you. And also the only way we get close to what our voices would be saying and the stuff that needs to really be healed is to act. When we try to think it through and heal first and all the things ahead of time to make sure we're doing the right thing, that's perfectionism. And that perfectionism, that relationship to perfectionism will never bring us into liberatory practice. So it has to be that we do the next right thing. And as we're doing it, we meet upon both the self that is doing the true work and the self that's there like, oh, I'm gonna pat myself on the back because I'm allowing my, and both of those selves and all of those selves live in us at the same time. And so there we are, no one is exempt from, yeah, and we aren't sitting down judging the people who gave, like, I'm sure people who gave in an entitled way or whatever. There are people who gave for all kinds of motivations, and that's not my business.
Yeah.
I'm just like, thank you very much. Right? Thank you very much. You do your work, I do my work. So it doesn't even really matter if Savior Becky showed up. Then we get to have a look and dialogue with Savior Becky. And in the meanwhile, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's on me to do the work of tending to Savior Becky and quieting Savior Becky. And you're right, like that's not, and but I also think it was a reminder for me too of the spaces that we occupy and being really intentional and thoughtful about the spaces that we decide to be inside of. Because like I know, and I actually had a separate conversation with Taina also about some of this, about some of my stuff that was coming up. And just that, like, having those spaces to go and be able to
Yep.
talk about Savior Becky's here and to have places where that will be held and not judged and not thrown back at you or whatever. Under people who understand, like you said, perfectionism isn't the work. It's not about being perfect. It's not about doing this quote unquote right all the time. And that having places where you can go to have those conversations too when the messy stuff shows up as you're trying to endeavor to be a better human, because it will be messy. And so it was important that I had those spaces as well where I could go and talk about that part of it. And just a reminder too of like, this is mutual, because I guess another discomfort that came up for me was this, and I think I talked to you about it. I know I talked to Taina about it. This feeling of, what do I owe, quote unquote, owe these people who've now contributed to this thing, right? These 50 people, what do I owe them? And it's like, I don't owe them anything. This is not a charitable giving thing. There's no tax deduction. There's no write-off for them. They're not, like, the whole idea of mutual aid is not, I'm giving this money with strings attached, right? I expect to know how it's spent, where it's spent, why it's spent. I need my receipt for my records and all of that. And yet I'm so conditioned into that way of thinking about quote unquote giving. That's part of that. My discomfort came up as like, I need to, like, what do I need to document, to show, to tell them? How many times do we need to fall over stumbling saying thank you? Like, we grovel at your feet. And I had to really check myself because I kept feeling this real strong urge to do that. But part of, I think, the modeling it is also helping those folks learn you're not obligated to any, like, you're not owed any of that. And you may be feeling that discomfort. And now you get to sit in that discomfort of, well, how do I know where Faith sends money? How do I know what happened? I mean, we did share an email showing a picture of the car and just sort of updating, because I did feel like I wanted to share the lessons from this. And I felt like that was important, but not so much the, like, Faith owes you 1,000 thank yous, and I need to, like, show up and show that, I did this and that. But it was hard because that discomfort came up too, of feeling like some sense of I owe them something.
Yeah, and I think I think we're in a unique, not unique, but we're in a specific role here in our community because as catalysts, as agitators, as people are holding the space, we're both talking about some of this stuff and trying to live it out in front of people and put ourselves in the lab. And that's not everybody's work. A friend of mine and I were in a conversation this morning about Taisi Coates' book, The Message. And in the tour and stuff, when people are asking him questions, oh my goodness, so what do we do now? And he's like, my work is the writer. And as the writer, I document what I see and I give it to you. You have to figure out what your work is. And so just to say that I know what we are doing is a reflection of our work. And people who might critique it or might say, hey, Becky's being whatever, they need to figure out their work. Us, what we are doing is living day to day and trying to hold the principles that we're talking about and seeing how they're showing up in our day-to-day lives, and then sharing that with folks. And that's our work, right? So other people, I guess part of what I'm feeling in my body right now is first the thing that not everybody is going to do this work. People have to figure out what their work is. And if this isn't their work, mind your business. It's not for them. Yeah, you can't critique Becky doing Becky's work and doing it like a human being does it, or Faith, or whoever. So this is my work, is the constant noticing of how it feels to be vulnerable and to work through what in this America here sounds like everybody jumping on a side and being really hostile and violent about it. And recognizing the feeling of risk, like, oh my goodness, I might be on the receiving end of that hostility. What does that mean? While I'm just trying to live my life, just trying to live my life and breathe in and breathe out. And last quick point, to the point of, what you were saying about what is owed to folks. Whenever that shows up for me, I don't argue with it, but I just ask myself, I breathe in air all the time. What is owed to the air? This system of living, there is no owing. There is breathe in and breathe out. We're all doing it. There is something that the person who gave received in the giving. That's just how the world works.
Ah,
And I have to just trust, you better receive the thing that came to you. But I know, thank you very much for the thing that came to me, because just as I take in the air, I breathe it out. That's just how this is. I'll also say here that for the workshop that we have coming up, where we're going to invite people to bring a discomfort, bring a conflict, bring something, that as I was deconstructing just my own process and my process with clients, I realized that there are these key relationships that we need to be tending to be able to be with discomfort between people well. And so whether it's a relationship with the self, I'm calling that personhood. We're going to call that personhood in our workshop coming up. The relationship with the other, and whether, like, what's our heart towards difference? Because often discomfort and conflict is showing up because of some kind of relationship to difference, or the relationship to the problem itself and the context that the problem is in, and whether that's triggering our need to kind of be the most efficient, be the most right, hustle or corporate or whatever it is. And I think that part of what we're going to do is invite all of us into a certain kind of relationship with these three domains in the upcoming workshop.
peek behind the curtain. I'm having internet issues, so I've dropped out of this call like 3 times. And now I'm just really hoping that the call is recording, frankly, and that like my end of this will show up. I don't know. I know you were just talking about the workshop. Before that, I just wanted to say what you were talking about, the symbiosis in the air. That's where I left, which is that it makes me think of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, too. And just reading that book is such a great place to start when you're thinking about some of these issues and the discomfort, and remembering that like the tree isn't uncomfortable with its relationship with the air and the ground and the rain, and those things are not uncomfortable that we can tell anyway. They don't seem to express discomfort. They know that they support each other, and that's just the way it is in nature. And so it's such a great reminder for that. I'm sorry I missed everything you said about the workshop, but I'm sure it was great.
I just kind of encapsulated the model that we will be using, because I centered it on our three important relationships: the relationship to ourself, our personhood, the relationship to power, and the relationship to the actual problem.
In the example of what we were talking about with the car and that whole experience, how would you outline those 3 places with that story?
For me personally, my relationship with myself and discomfort, I have a bunch of practices in place. I think for every relationship, you need to be doing 2 things. You need to be monitoring what's going on here, and you need to be modifying the relationship so it stays in a restorative and nourishing and generative place. And I have practices for that with myself already, with my personhood. But part of the checking is just what's happening here for me in myself. What are my identity issues that are being brought to the surface? Like, what's going on in terms of this discomfort? Relationship with the other. In this case, the other is you, but also the other is insurance companies and tow people. And I had to, for me, correctly categorize like what is happening and to recognize power over. I call in this last clip, I call it relationship to power. It is power over. And therefore, that situates me in a certain place to the power that's being acted and helps me to not blame myself. This is not my fault. It's not because I wasn't smart enough. I had the wrong insurance policy. I didn't speak the right way to the right, So there was a relationship to the other in terms of the insurance company, but also a relationship to you, recognizing my desire to caretake you and not let you have the experience you're having. And then what does it mean to be in a power with scenario or with you? That was me kind of pulling on my big girl thing and say, okay, I can talk about, I can be on the active side of asking for what I need. And so that was, because there's a part of this that as the person creating the invitation, there is a power element there for you as well. And so part of me saying, I can also be part of this, that together we are doing it. And to hold that, that was part of the, power sharing. So that's relationship with the other. And then a relationship with the problem itself. It's not something that's happening to me. And it's not something that I need to fix in the perfect way. So I wanted to have had cash. And so that I could buy the thing fully. What I ended up doing to get a safe car, I've had a honest conversation with the car dealership people who were all in a hustle themselves, and they got me a loan that was at a rate that was sensible. And that allowed me to both have a significant deposit, but to pay for 6 months of my insurance. I think the relationship with the problem, once I am not needing to be perfect, not needing to be the most efficient, not needing to be the most smart, work the system, then it helped me. What do I actually need? And it helped me find other paths, which then allowed me to, so the insurance is paid for 6 months. Thank you very much, all the people who contributed. And then I've given myself a year to pay off the loan. I don't know if I will or if I won't, but I have, my shoulders aren't hiked up.
Mm.
I did not leave the car dealership unable to pay my rent, which is how went in, even with the donations, so I think
Contributions.
uh, contributions.
Okay.
So I think that that's the part of the thing, is slowing yourself down enough to look at your relationship in each of these areas and then settle in to what's your wise self saying, given your honest understanding of your relationship. Some of these relationships we haven't tended at all. Not everybody has been navigating their relationship with their self in the ways that you and I have been talking about. And so you may just be at the place where you're like, whoa, I get uncomfortable about a lot of stuff. And then some of that is just, can we switch from judgment to curiosity? If that's the place you're at. Where for me, it was about, there are some practices that I have that I'm applying in other areas that I need to double down on for right now because it's urgent. I need to move through this and it feels hella awful. And so it's just like, all right, it's a time for, the proverbial drink the garlic and eat your vegetables and drink water for my soul. I had to be kind of doing some intense tending.
Yeah, and I think, also, no matter where you're at on your own journey, it's never gonna stop. I don't think. I mean, maybe there are some amazing monks or something out there who no longer feel discomfort, but I don't think so. Like, I feel like the more that I continue to work on myself, in some ways, it's like, I think even see it more. So in some ways, I feel like I have more discomfort, and I don't think it's because there is more discomfort. It's because I'm noticing it more. I'm able to key in on it more quickly. I'm more in tune with my body, my feelings, my thoughts, and all of those things that I can notice it more. And I think I'm better able to be with it, which is huge. And then being able to sort of figure out, what do I do with it? But that's the biggest change. The change is not that discomfort goes away, right? Like there's discomfort constantly. And I think that's important for us to know that, like, the goal is it's not to beat discomfort, to win against discomfort, to never feel discomfort again. And that's your sign that you've mastered this. That's not what it is. It's like, you're always going to have discomfort. And so it's, where are you at on that journey of, can you even recognize it as discomfort versus what I think in the past I would do, which is right, just like I'm right, or I'm aggrieved, or, all of these other things, and not realize, oh no, I'm just uncomfortable. That's all it is. I'm just really uncomfortable. So one
And
can,
not,
yeah, can you
yeah, not
recognize it?
not all discomfort means some harm is happening, and that because we have been so kind of trained to be danger, discomfort equals danger, then we are misdiagnosing so many situations and then misdiagnosing in a snap and then reacting to our misdiagnosis. A lot of the work that we are doing with ourselves is to slow that process down because this email that I got is not a lion, a tiger, or a bear, even though my body feels like it is. It's not. And yes, there are threats and there are challenges, but I have when I let myself, I have this prefrontal cortex, I have strategic planning skills. In the moment of the actual problem, I do have the ability. And so the discomfort is trying to protect me from something that's not really the thing that's happening right now. And as we can build our relationship to discomfort, so it's actually in service, it's just information. And can I let that information be in service to where I want to go versus have me in constant defend and protect, which does not take us where we want to go.
Yeah, I think it's like, can I see it as what it is, which is discomfort, versus the other ways I have in the past tried to categorize it that usually are about then trying to avoid it. And then can I be with it, which is a really challenging thing. I think, especially for white women, I'll speak to my group of people, which is that we have been so coddled in our lives and tended to and treated in a way that we have never learned to be with discomfort. And we've been really taught to be afraid of our discomfort. And so we don't know how to be with it. So can I see it as discomfort? Can I be with it? Can I exist with the discomfort? And then, like, only then do you get to the third place of, and then what do I do with the discomfort? How do I, I don't even say manage, because that sounds like you're trying to tame it, control it. But it's just like, what do I do with this information now? And so those are sort of like, I think, three steps along this process of discomfort. And I think for people who are still at that place, I think if you are just getting to that place of recognizing things as discomfort, or if no matter where you're on that continuum, I think a workshop like with what Faith and I are planning will be really helpful for people. So I don't know how much you shared, Faith, about the workshop, but we're going to hammer out the final details and get everything shared in the show notes, the email, the wherever you're consuming this. We'll have details about how to sign up for the workshop that's coming up in March.
Yeah, I didn't, I just shared philosophical stuff.
Okay, philosophically. Well, then we'll get to specifically soon, but it's coming, and we'll have the details. Hopefully by the time we share this video, we'll have all the details attached to it. So if you want to join us, because the goal really is, it's not about mastering your discomfort. If you want to be in a space where you're like, I recognize myself in that, I don't know how to be uncomfortable, or when I am uncomfortable, I don't know what to do with that discomfort, or it scares me so much I avoid it because I'm not sure how to be with it and how to exist and then do something useful with it. Then that's what I hope people will get out of a workshop like this, is that early part of just understanding discomfort is a way of life, and avoiding it isn't serving you, and it's often harming others.
Yeah, and I think that when we can have that right relationship, then our conflict navigation has some space to breathe, and then we can really arrive at solutions that serve us all.
Yeah, changes your relationship with yourself and with others, and those
Yeah.
are really important. Well, thank you for having this conversation, because I think it's really interesting, it's just one of many ways that the stuff plays out, but it was such a big kind of it felt like such a sort of big, clear example of where discomfort shows up, and then how do we navigate through that to not allow it to derail us from what we're actually wanting to get out of the situation. Because just like you, I think if this hadn't been if it hadn't been in support of you, I would have probably been much quieter. I wouldn't have done what I would have done. When I first you said, we got $200, I'm going to be able to send you a couple $100. And I felt kind of bad about it. I probably would have stopped there though, if it was me. Right. And I was really happy that we sort of persevered through both of our discomfort to get to a place where it felt like a really meaningful, by the end of it, to me, it felt like, oh, that feels like a meaningful amount of money that is a difference maker. And that felt really good, where if I had allowed my discomfort to shut it down sooner, I would have come out of the experience feeling shitty. I'm glad I didn't. Like, I felt really good by the end of it. And I hope you did too.
Absolutely. I felt cared for, because as much as we want to not make money be as meaningful a thing as it is, it
It is.
is. It is. And it's, like you said, I wish I had the magic spell to change some leaves or something that we have a lot of into cash. And so just this idea of, wow, together, this was what was created, So I really was helpful is a very small word for what was possible in 2 days. Thank you so much for hosting this conversation with me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Faith, and for sharing the experience on your side of it and mine. And I will include information about the workshop. So if you're seeing this and you're interested in our discomfort workshop, check out the details. We'd love to see you there. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for being here. And again, we hope you'll consider joining our paid membership to help support our work. The link is in the show notes. When you join, you get all of this, obviously, but also bonus content in a private podcast feed, as well as free admission into our Feminist Founders Society community calls. It's a wonderful growing community, and we'd love to have you be a part of it and to support the work we do with Feminist Founders. Until next time, keep kicking toxic capitalism to the curb, friends.